It's time to talk about episode 3 of Prehistoric Planet Ice Age. This episode is titled Desert Lands, and as the name suggests, the main focus is the deserty side of the Ice Age, the side that not many people think about when they think of the Ice Age. I really loved this episode. There's a lot of really great things to sink your teeth into. My main highlight for me, like the biggest thing for me, was the fact that we got to spend a lot of time in Pleistocene Australia. I love Pleistocene Australia because it's just a fascinating location in the Pleistocene. There's so many crazy animals that once existed there, and a lot of those animals that I love really got the spotlight here. I use the word spotlight a lot, but that's like the best word to describe the fact that we have a huge focus on some of these lesser known animals. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. We do start off the episode with the sloth carrying her baby trying to climb to the top of the mountain. Obviously, that's just really great stuff to showcase. It's a different side of these animals that, again, we don't usually see, and I loved every minute of it. Also, I'm just going to give this disclosure for every video. There will be spoilers ahead, so if you want to avoid that, then, click away right now. But the first Australian creature that we are introduced to is Diprotodon, a giant wombat relative. It's also likely the largest marsupial to ever exist, as far as we know. Man, their design was so cool here, and it was amazing to see them actually do something a little bit more substantial. A lot of time when we see a creature like Diprotodon, it's mostly like a background character or just something that just walks around a little bit. Here we get to see a little bit of a dispute between two members of the herd because their leader had just passed on, so two more of them are kind of like competing for that spot of leader, essentially. So we get to see that, and then we see them migrate to try to find some water, which eventually leads them to following a mirage, and then, finding out that there is no water here until they start digging, and then, that reveals some water. A lot of modern day elephants do that, so it was really cool to see it in this sort of setting. There was also Thylacoleo, which is sometimes called the marsupial lion. Obviously, it's important to note that it's not a lion. It is a marsupial, but it's not a cat or anything like that. Their design was great. I love the coloration. I love the texturing and the fur, and I love the striping that they were given. Their story is that they are starving. They haven't been getting a lot of food because of all of these environmental changes that have been happening to them. They've lost a lot of their forests and things like that, so they're not really well equipped to hunt in this sort of environment. Eventually, that leads to this really great scene where they're hunting a bunch of Procoptodon, which are the giant short-faced kangaroos. Eventually, they ambush them, and it leads to the Procoptodon starting to run away. And of course, they're slow. They're these giant animals. And then it's revealed that the Thylacoleos are slow. And the only thing I could picture in this moment was that one clip of Homer Simpson as like a Neanderthal chasing after a giant ground sloth, and they're both just moving very slow. That's like the main thing that I could think of right there. It was really cool. They fail to catch one, but later on, it's revealed that one of the Thylacoleo is hiding in a tree and ready to ambush them, and she drops down to get one of the babies. And this is actually one of the few baby deaths that we've seen so far. There hasn't been a lot of that recently in this season of Prehistoric Planet, which is in stark contrast to the first two seasons that had a lot of that. But she's able to drag it back and then, provide some food for her young, which is, I don't think I mentioned that, but she did have young that were starving. All of that was really great stuff. I loved it. I especially loved how the second hunt was shot. It felt like a real nature documentary where first they had a shot of the Procoptodon at the bottom of the tree, and then the camera pans up to reveal the Thylacoleo hiding on a branch, getting ready to pounce. And again, that just felt like it was something that was very realistic. And the way that it dropped down too in the slow motion just was very well done. We get to see the giant moas here too. And man, me and my wife loved this section. Giant moas, they are very fascinating birds, huge birds too, like one of the largest that we know of. However, I will say that this is probably where another one of my criticisms comes in, and that's the way that they handle locations. A lot of times you're following some animals in one specific location, and then it just quickly, like maybe you get a small animal to act as like a little transitional creature, and then you move on to the next location where you're focusing on your next big animal. And a lot of times you might be left thinking that these animals live in the same location. And I think a lot of people are getting the impression that the giant moa lived in Australia because of how quickly it showed up after the Australian segments. And there's no establishment that the giant moa lived in New Zealand. That is one criticism that I have with the show, along with the fact that they don't really specify what animal you're looking at nearly enough. Yeah, so, if I were to have two main complaints or criticisms, those would be it. But anyway, back to the moas at hand. The main story that we're following here is a male who's trying to find a mate. There's a lot of sexual dimorphism. The males are smaller than the females. And when he eventually does find one, it's shown that he needs to make himself look small to seem appealing to the female. And I don't know, it was just very fun. There was a lot of character that was placed into this male moa that was just very charming, and it was just awesome. My wife wants to make a puppet of it, and I'm like, yeah, do that because you can do stuff like that. So she's probably going to do that. There was also this one moment where when she eventually like accepts him as a mate, he's like showing her which leaves to eat, and he can't quite reach them because he's short. So he's like trying to jump up, like, point them out, I guess. And then she starts eating them. And then another male shows up and he's like honking to chase after her. By the way, their noises were great. They were like rat type noises where they're just like these very low grumbles, or these really like they're forcing air through their esophagus, making these really loud growls. It was great. I loved it. It felt very real. I also love the blue. I love seeing blue on creatures like this because it's a rare color in nature. So seeing blue is always just very fun. There were also some small kangaroos that were present. Their section was focused around Megalania in large part. There's a bunch of baby Megalanias that they're chasing after. I love their movements. Their movements were very lizard-like. There's a lot of moments where they would just be sitting there, and then when they realize they're being chased, they would just zip off into a rock. Great. It was great stuff. And then the adult Megalania shows up and eats one of its babies, which again is another baby death, which is something that we still haven't seen too much of here. Again, just very different from the first two seasons. I didn't mention this in the trailer breakdown, but the Megalania does have a slit pupil here, which is not correct. There's no Varanids that we know of that have a slit pupil. Apparently, according to Darren Naish, that was a design mistake that wasn't caught until very late in development. So they are aware of the fact that Megalania would have had rounded pupils, much like, modern day monitor lizards. But it was simply just a mistake. Aside from that little drawback, everything else looks great about this Megalania. There's some elements about it that do look like a Komodo dragon, but it still looks a little bit distinct. Like, it feels like it has a few extra patterns and colors that's a little bit different from a Komodo dragon, which I love because they are very closely related to Komodo dragons, but with how diverse the Varanus genus is, I think it's fine if you like add a few more colors and patterns here and there to make it a little bit more distinct from a Komodo dragon, because it is its own lizard, so I think that would be a fine route to take. And it does seem like they took that. Again, I love the movements of the Megalania as it was chasing after these little baby kangaroos, and the way that it was climbing up on the rocks trying to get to them was really great. So yeah, I love the Megalania as well. I pretty much loved everything Australia in this episode. I thought that the Australia stuff was really fantastic. I also did really like the sloth stuff. The When she was trying to climb down to get back into her cave, and the Territorans were trying to like mess her up so that she would fall to her death and then they can eat her. It was a very tense scene, and it was very well shot and just horrifying, really. So another solid episode. I loved this episode. I just loved seeing Pleistocene Australia with this quality of CGI. That felt so real, like it was an actual nature documentary that happened. Also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but after each episode, there is a little segment called Under the Ice, where it's kind of like they add some additional information about some questions that you might have. One of those questions is, why are there so many deserts, so many huge and deadly deserts during the Ice Age? And I recommend checking that stuff out. And it's revealed that the reason why that is because you need a lot of water to make the ice caps that make up the Ice Age. Go figure. And there's only so much water on the Earth, so a lot of that water that would go into other environments is actually going to the ice caps. So as a result, you get a lot of environments that are turning into deserts. I'm glad that they provided that because I'm sure a lot of people would have questions about that. And providing the answers to those questions is always great for a documentary. You know, education is always awesome. I always love to see it. So another incredible episode. Again, I just loved the Australia portions, and I'm probably going to watch this episode multiple times in the future. That actually might go for the other episodes too. I don't know. Highly recommend checking it out. But that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have an awesome day.